In India, in-laws are a problem. You're not starting with it. They become the problem eventually because of lack of boundaries. If they create boundaries, there are no issues. Guy has seen mother always cooking food. They are well educated. Still, they want their wife to be in the kitchen to cook food because they have seen that. For them, their normal is mom in the kitchen. Their mind is attuned that this is your primary responsibility. Why should I do it? Something is not working out. Let's talk to the families. Counselor के पास में जाने की क्या ज़रूरत है? It never works. Families and friends, they are also bringing their traumas into the relationship. And judgment. More than judgment, it's more like trauma. The girl's mom had some issues with her in-laws. She will guide her daughter accordingly. These days, there's opposite suggestion also that has come up. Part ways. You're independent. You're not dependent on him or her for anything. Why do you want to put in the effort? Maybe she can work. Maybe the issues are not that bad. Maybe the girl herself is a narcissist and she's not able to realize it. She's just self-victimizing herself.
Do people reach a stage of we don't want to get divorced but we hate each other? So Dr. Mansi, tell us, you left a corporate career to become a psychologist, and before you became someone who decodes other people's patterns and mindsets, other people's relationships, what was the relationship pattern that you were carrying unconsciously in your life?
To be very honest, Ashna, I was not in any relationship before that. So there was no pattern. And I think that is a kind of blessing because I was just starting afresh. But I think somewhere, it was not a pattern, but I was looking for a validation that I can have a good relationship. So that was definitely there.
How old were you when you got married?
I got married at the age of 24.
So do you think at 24, one is capable of navigating a complex relationship like marriage?
Not really. Not really. You just don't know what to do, how to behave. There were no of that time, I'm talking about 2007, there was no awareness what marriage is. It's just like two people getting into the system and now figure out how to float into it. So I had no clue about it. So I have no clue. I had no clue about it, how to navigate it. But to be very honest, if I see it now, from last few years, ever since I've started working as a relationship counselor, touch wood, God's grace, my relationship, because I apply all of these learnings into my relationship with my husband too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it really helps a lot to have better communication, how to do conflict management. It's not like you don't end up fighting. Of course, there are two different people with two different ideologies. You will definitely fight, but how to fight in a better way.
Yeah.
Not to continue those, bad memories in your mind. Now I know. That time I had no clue about it.
Yeah, I think one is that accepting there's going to be disagreements through the rest of your life. Second, what you said very correctly is how to fight correctly. Instead of putting the other person down, being disrespectful, being abusive, whether it's emotionally, physically, how to solve the fight better. It's all about why should I always apologize? Why should I always bend? Why should I always agree with him? Or why should I always agree with her? She cries, he cries, whichever way it is. I think the lens changes as the years go down. And I hope it does with everybody. At least mine has as well. For me also, it's been a decade and a half and the lens has completely changed to what it was when the relationship starts. And I think the benefit of the lens changing is you realize in the end, peace is more important. It's not winning the argument. And I think when you're younger, it's all about I'm right. And I think you stick to the fact that no, but I'm right. And I want to prove that I'm right this way or the other. And it's not about girl, boy, wife, husband, everyone. I think humans function on that thing where everybody wants to prove that you're right. Even with an argument with your mother or your father or your friends, your whole thing is let me prove my point.
These days, we talk about that if you want to have a good relationship, it's very important to park your I, me, my aside. If you're constantly talking about, this is what I want, this is what my needs are, I want to be right like you truly said, then for sure the relationship will end. And you will always feel miserable. Because your entire story, your entire narrative is revolving around you. You're not being empathetic with your partner at all. Then how will it work?
Also, I think that obsession with self will not be a good relationship with self as well. What you said, it's forget the fact that you won't have a good relationship with your partner, you'll be miserable even with yourself, because the focus is so much on what you want, and the more you don't have it, the more miserable you'll be. So I think even to balance your relationship with yourself, you can't only focus on yourself. I don't know if that makes sense.
It truly makes sense. And
Yeah.
this is what I say to every client of mine, whoever is coming for relationship counseling. The most important thing is your individual self should be happy.
Yeah.
You know, to give love, it's important to love yourself. If
And to be
you-
happy within. How do you
and
give
if
happiness?
you are hollow deep within, you're not happy with the way you are, you will not be able to give anything. Rather, you will always be on the receiving end. And then the other person, how long the other person will survive, right? So it's the most important thing that I have learned as a relationship counselor too is love yourself. The most important ingredient in any happy marriage.
I completely agree. So you work with Bhagavad Gita, CBT, hypnotherapy and yoga all at once. Tell me, when a couple sits in front of you, completely broken, which of these tools do you actually reach out for first and why?
So these are the tools that we apply after having individual conversations with the individual. When we are having couple counseling, these tools are not applied that time. That time we just try to figure out the root causes, because when we talk about relationship, there are few things which need to be aligned. What are these things? It's personality, values, aspiration, attachment style, love language. If these are aligned, only then the relationship will sail through. So first we do normal understandings, what the root causes are, where the alignment is not there. Then we get back to these tools. For example, let's say there is somebody who is carrying abandonment issues. You know, there's a constant fear of being abandoned. Then cognitive behavioral therapy is used along with hypnosis. So these things will come later, not in the beginning of the session.
So it depends on the diagnosis, and obviously as you dig deeper, you'll understand which tools to use.
These tools are primarily individual tools, but couple, we first figure out the root causes and then come to the individual tools. Like we discussed, individually you need to be sorted to ensure that the relationship can give you mental peace.
So I find relationship counseling or marriage counseling or understanding yourself, how you work, how you function in a relationship, one of the most interesting aspects of psychology. For me, it's one of my personal favorites. So let's get into the marriage room. Okay. In your years of couples counseling, what's the one thing both partners almost never say to each other, but say the moment they are sitting in front of you?
All right. So when they are not saying it to each other, but they confess it to me.
Yeah. They don't say it to each other, but they're sitting with you for couples counseling and it comes out. What is the most common thing?
I'll share two things. The first thing is they say, Mansi, I think I'm not liking this person anymore. The second is, I don't think they want to understand only. These are the two most common. Out of these two also, the first one is most common. When you stop liking the person over the period of time. And why it usually happens is, you know, when you as an individual stop evolving. You know, when we were in teenage, love used to happen in a very different way. It was the purest form of love, which came with no conditions. Those violins being played in the background, you know, no logical reasoning, nothing. You just love the person. But over the period of time, you need to like the person more than you love them. And that liking will happen only when you're constantly evolving yourself. So this is one of the most common thing, that I'm not liking the person anymore.
What do you say to them when they say something like, I'm not liking this person? Because in the end, these are two individuals who are married who've come to you, right? And like you said very correctly, loving is one thing, but you have to like the person. So how do you tackle it at that point?
So of course, that person, whoever they're not able to like, maybe the wife is not liking the husband. That is why we do individual counselings with them. Not to tell it to them, oh, these are the things which your wife doesn't like, but just to make them understand that it is very important individually also to keep evolving, be it your body, be it your mindset, right, your career, your aspiration, your experiences, all of these things should evolve and you feel better about yourself. So there's a way to put it across. It's not an attack. It's more like making the other person understand how things can be better with him individually. And once they understand that this is important individually as well, automatically partner will start liking them.
Tell me, I'm very curious, do people reach a stage of couples counseling when they're really like at the last bit of we don't want to get divorced, but we hate each other. Let's go for it. Instead of, okay, we've been disagreeing a lot, and I feel like, we've reached that point where we are cold with each other. Let's consider counseling.
The first one, and that is the worst stage to come for the counseling, because you've almost reached the zone wherein you started hating each other.
You've exhausted.
Very exhausted.
Yeah.
You just don't. Sometimes they are so exhausted, they don't even want to talk about it. They don't want to go back to talk about all those traumas, those hurt, disappointments. So that is the worst stage to come for the counseling. Counseling should start with what you said, the latter one, wherein there are constant disagreement. You're not able to put your words to your partner. It's like you're talking French, your partner is understanding German, which means there's no communication happening in the right way. That is the right time to go ahead and seek couple counseling, rather than just like, let's figure it out, try 100% before you take divorce. So let's just go and talk to the counselor. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, because I think largely, at least over the years, what I've seen is that couples counseling is something people frown at or walk away from or don't consider till really they're considering leaving each other. It's like that last straw. Instead of, let's work out together, we both are gaining weight. It's a solution. Instead of sitting on the couch and watching a movie and eating snacks at 7 p.m. every day, why don't you and I both go and play badminton, for example? Why don't people just see it as, hey, it's, things are just getting sour between us very quickly, every day, escalating. Why don't we consider couples counseling? Like, I feel like that's still not the attitude,
It is not. You're absolutely right. Because they also think that, okay, if something is not working out, let's talk to the families, na? Counselor के पास में जाने की क्या ज़रूरत है? Let's talk to families, friends, but believe you me, it never works. Reason being, families and friends, they are also bringing their traumas into the relationship.
And judgment.
And judgment. More than judgment, it's more like trauma. If let's say the girl's mom had some issues with her in-laws, she will guide her daughter accordingly. So it's coming from a lot of notions. It's not neutral suggestions.
Yes, it's always biased.
It's always biased. So it's always good to go to the counselor the moment you feel something is not going right. You're not able to put across your points to your partner. You feel that your partner is not understanding the positive effect in the relationship, which actually means positive experiences, doing things together, having fun together. If you feel that these things are going down, immediately consult relationship counselor there.
You're right. What you said actually makes me, it makes me go back and think about when I hear people talking to their parents. Let's say that they're mostly girls, let's say when they haven't been able to adjust or they're not happy or they feel like the families they're married into don't understand them, they've not found their footing, and they will ask their parents for help, mostly mental help. And the parents will, like you said, bring in their trauma. So the mother would guide according to what she has seen. And a lot of times it's also just adjust. I did. Just take it. I did.
True.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Don't take it so seriously. Just ignore it because I did. But that's not really a solution.
These days there's opposite suggestion also that has come up, which is part ways. It's okay. You're independent. You're not dependent on him or her for anything. Why do you want to put in the efforts? Because mother had traumas and she adjusted throughout her life. She is suggesting opposite thing to daughter. Maybe she can work. Maybe the issues are not that bad. Maybe the girl herself is a narcissist and she's not able to realize it. She's just self-victimizing herself. Who knows? So the opposite suggestions are also happening.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always, an advocate for counseling. I always feel like go for therapy, go for counseling. If not couples, go for yourself. Figure out what your traumas are. If you can clear the path for yourself, you'll be able to clear the couple's path as well. At least yours is clear. You can guide the other person. You'll be able to see what's going wrong in the relationship, the 50% part or the 60, 70% part that you're playing in it. It can't always be 100% of just the other person. It's like takes two to tango.
There is one more thing that couples say to me. They say that, we know each other so well. How will that third person who doesn't even know either of us can help us? Here I want to say that we are trained. There are so many tools and techniques that we use in our couple counseling sessions. And then these tools and techniques, they are designed after doing longitudinal researches on the couples. They are not like, oh, you are wrong, you please change it, the relationship is fine. Never ever about it. It is not band-aid work.
Yeah.
It's a root cause, figuring it out, fixing that, and then ensuring that the relationship goes ahead forever.
I agree. I mean, anyways, in life, there's no shortcuts. Everything has to be worked
Band-aid
upon.
work will never ever sustain. 1 year down the line, they'll go to another counselor then.
Completely agree. So, tell me, in your years of couples counseling, who is willing to mend the relationship more? When men or women? And why do you think that is, whichever one it is?
No, that's a very interesting question. I think women are more likely to work towards it. The reason being, the orientation of women is slightly different than men. There's this book also that talks about it, that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. It is so true. Women in their mind, they think more emotionally. In men in their mind, they think more logically. So for men, it's fine, it's not working. They'll engage themselves into 10 other things and they'll try to forget it. They just don't care. But for women, she wants fulfilled family. She wants fulfilled happiness, and all these things are contributing to her happiness. So I feel women are more inclined, but once men, they come with their wives for the relationship counseling, then they are equally invested. But that first step, most of the times women take it.
But I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think it's the DNA wiring. You know,
It's the orientation. This is how we are made.
Yeah.
Men, they will just put most of the things under the carpet. So I'll share, 80% of the men are avoidant. Is it good or bad? In a way, it is good also, because they don't try to put their head into anything which is not logical. But when women, they are bringing that emotional side of it, and that is how we complement, right, the relationship. So it's fine. It doesn't matter who is taking the initiative. What matters is, are both of them equally invested to work towards it?
What you said is so right. I had a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and I said, just imagine, like people say, no, he's so cold, he doesn't care, he doesn't listen, he's busy on the laptop. I'm telling him all these things, and then he's like, yeah, fine, we'll figure it out. Whatever, like you said, the logical response. And the women's response is usually an emotional one. And I said, just imagine what if you were crying about a problem, he starts crying too, you wouldn't know what to do. So I'm like, that's the yin and yang, Thank God that they don't sit there sobbing as well and saying, yeah, you spoke to me very badly at breakfast. Just imagine if your husband did that, you wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah.
If he starts...
Both of them are grieving together.
Yeah, I just feel like somewhere it's a balance. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying that everybody wants a cold husband. Nobody wants a cold husband. You want somebody who understands. But I think men just deal with emotions very differently.
That's true.
It's not like they don't have any. I just think they deal with it very differently. And I think women get irritated or aggravated or angry. It's like because they're like, oh, you're not dealing it the way I want you to deal with it.
I would like to just give one line to it. It's not an intentional problem. It's an inability, right? They don't have that ability. It's not that they're intending to hurt their partners by ignoring them, not listening to them. They don't know how to do that. And that is where we help them understand and navigate it through. Like, we actually talk logical to them. I give a lot of scientific facts, how the brain works, make them understand, then they understand and put in the efforts to do it. I had this particular case wherein the wife, right, because of her own childhood, right, she is coming from a very damaged family, completely dysfunctional setup, wherein parents are divorced, and she has seen very ugly divorce between the parents. Then the mother got married, so she moved along with her mother in this second marriage of her mother. That also did not work because of whatever reasons, right? So she had a very traumatic childhood. She has seen so much of abandonment for herself, for her mother, that her anxious attachment style is extremely high. Now she got married to the guy who was completely avoidant. Like we are talking, he doesn't understand emotions. And the guy is coming from completely functional family. Number one, the relatability is out of the window. He doesn't understand that how can somebody be so anxious. Let's say she is calling her husband and he's in the meetings. it doesn't click him to give a call back. Not that he's intending to hurt her, but just doesn't click because he's so invested in his entire work schedule. On the contrary, the girl thinks, oh,
He doesn't care.
he's abandoning me. Everybody has behaved the same way with me. He is also just the same. I expected so much from him. I thought he will understand me. He's also not understanding me. Now, that's her baggage, and this guy is not intending to hurt her. It's just that this guy doesn't have the ability to think it through like the way she thinks. So we are wired differently on the basis of our experiences, our orientation, and that creates so much of difference in the relationship.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think people use the word compatibility so loosely, but it all boils down to like two people who've been brought up so differently. You know, you could be from the same socio-economic background. You could be from two similar cultures. You could be from two similar families. But your parents, the way they brought you up, the value system, the emotional depth that they brought to your childhood, that varies, right? And your anxiety or your attachment, your neediness, your response to fights, conflicts, love language, like you said, everything will vary dependent on that.
So, the way you think is driven by so many other things in the background, like your past life karmas. Okay. Then, when your mother was carrying you, but then when you were born, how was the entire surroundings around you? Your school experiences, your friends' experiences, educational experiences, and then when you started working, how was those experience? All of these things pushes you to think the way you end up thinking. And that is where the difference is. When because of all of these experiences, you have certain narrative about your own life, about your own self, you want the other person to constantly understand you. That's not possible. That's a very unreasonable demand. And that also creates a lot of confusion between the couples.
Completely agree. And I think it takes a lot of maturity to reach this stage to think like this. I don't think like when I got married, I was thinking like this. I was also from the thought process like, no, I've been brought up like this. He should understand. But how can he? You know, it takes time, it takes years, it takes experiences, instances, circumstances to understand like, no, there's more to them than just the fact that you came from this, he came from this, but then how do you make it work?
And there is another thing. So for most of the men, they just don't want to change. That is
Rigidity.
very rigid. How difficult it is just to sit, listen to your partner, just say, I do understand, right? Give your listening ears your undivided attention for 10 minutes. Believe you me, if the man starts doing that, it will fix 50% of the marriages. But they just don't have patience to listen to what their partner is saying. That is a bigger problem. And their partners are not expecting them to fix the issues. If they will listen, they'll try to problem solving. And she doesn't want to solve a problem. She knows how to solve a problem. She just wants somebody to hear her out. That is it.
I agree. I think most of the time you just want to be heard. Heard, seen, validated. I don't really think it's about problem solving. I think women can do that anyway. We don't need a man for that.
But sometimes, you need your partner for that. Even if you have your girls' gang, you have very good set of parents, there are certain things that you want to be vulnerable in front of your partner only.
Absolutely.
And that is where you need a partner who's a good listener, who acknowledges her own feelings, her own emotions, and then positively reinforce how good she is. Simple steps, but they don't want to do it.
So you talk a lot about compatibility before marriage, right? And you've actually seen what happens inside marriages, like we spoke. So what's the one incompatible trait that you see that most people underestimate and it quietly destroys marriages?
Well, this is again a very interesting question. One most important and the most negative compatibility point is when you don't enjoy the friendship, when you don't enjoy doing things together, positive experiences together. The traveling experiences should be aligned. For example, I have clients wherein, the wife wants to just chill in a 5-star property, doesn't want to experience anything. And husband wants to go and experience all the water sports, bungee jumping, or wants to explore the place, fight. So when you are not able to, align your travel experiences, your fun activities together, as simple as playing board games together, these things really increases the positive effect in the relationship. And when the positive effect increases, your ability to handle, the trauma in the relationship is much more strong. So this is one part where I feel if incompatibility is there, it's very difficult to have a good marriage or good relationship. For example, let's say, one of the partner is super active. Like I had a case wherein one of the partners, she was very active, extremely extrovert, always out of the home, experiencing things, jumping into any kind of experiences like cooking, baking, so exploring things. On the contrary, husband is somebody who is complete introvert, doesn't want to go out, want to sit at home. Now she is going out to experience different things and he is completely at home, just binge watching. Now just understand what are the things that they will talk about. She comes back home, she wants to try and share her experiences, but the guy is completely silent. And even if, let's say, he's not interested in those activities, he has no keenness and curiosity to know more about what she has experienced because he's completely in his zone, completely incompatible about it. Over the period of time, this marriage literally died off. They moved towards silent divorce because they had nothing eventually to talk about.
And this must have started living two separate lives.
Yeah, he was always at home, she was always out. 10 years down the line, there is nothing between both of them except खाना क्या खाओगे, आज रात को dinner क्या बनवाना है, that is it. Just functional conversations. This is how slowly, when you do not have positive things to do together, marriage just dies off. There is no thread that can pull them.
That's true because functional questions can only take you so far.
Functional is dead. You need to have fun, the keenness, the curiosity. Where is that oiling coming in the relationship? The fun activity. When you do these, for example, I have this very happy-go-lucky couple. They came because they had some conflict in the beginning because of the families, but later on, both of them are very open for counseling. So they have this ritual. Even if relationship is going well, we'll still go and meet her once in a month. When they walk into the room, they have this, they keep pulling each other's leg, they keep adding fun in the room. The entire studio just, lightens up the moment these two people are there in the session. Why? Because they experience so many things together. Let's say they've gone out for bungee jumping. Something happened, some funny experience happened. They'll just try it, talk it out, laugh out together, talk about the other people, how their facial expressions were when they were jumping. So many things to be added when you're conversing. If you are not doing these things, what are the conversations? Career, kids, that is it.
Food.
That's it.
Yeah.
Nothing else. So then how are you spicing it up? Nothing.
That's true. I think even if the interests are not common, you can always persuade your partner to try the hobbies that you have, try the interests that you have.
Yeah.
It's that, try and pull and push, like you try this and I'll try that, and why don't you come with me and I come with you, and
This is
whatever. It's like
where,
that balance.
This is where I was telling you that rigidity, if you are rigid, marriage won't work, relationship won't work. You need that flexibility. Even if, let's say, you are not compatible, be open to experience what your partner likes. Even if you're not enjoying it, over the period of time, you will start enjoying it also.
Yeah.
But show that openness, which people don't show.
There's a very specific grief, that happens inside a marriage, and it's not divorce. It's almost like you see so many marriages that are dead,
Yes.
but they're not divorced. But I don't know what has died between them, something that is irreplaceable. What do you call that, and how do you bring someone back from it?
It's called a silent divorce, where things have gone completely, it's just living like two people, two flatmates. That is it. To bring somebody back here, like I'll share one story. I had a client wherein they were almost 15 years into their marriage, had love marriage, a beautiful relationship in the beginning, 5 years, no kids, no pet. Over the period of time, they had nothing in common, right? Both of them evolved, yes. It's a very interesting case. We always say that evolving is always good for marriage. Both of them evolved. But despite that, There was no chemistry between them. And over here, few things that was not going right in this particular relationship was no physical intimacy. That also really helps two people to bind together. Then no shared experiences, common interest, no couple goals. They did not want to buy a house, they did not want to have kids, they did not want to explore the world together in there. They were exploring the world not together but individually because their traveling experiences were different. So these three major things were missing and they actually moved to silent divorce. How we brought them back is they were very clear they do not want to have kids. They adopted a pet and that helped. Then we introduced a lot of activities for them, things that they can do together. Both of them, they learned new this thing. I think there's this dance from bachata. They started going for bachata classes. In the beginning, there was a lot of reluctance from the guy's side, but eventually, he was also into it. Then they started going for every week bachata classes. I could see from that dead setup, they had stories to talk about after their bachata classes. Then they started cooking together. Then they started having another couple goal together, which is let's buy house. They bought the house together. They did the interiors of the house together. Then that form of unit started coming back into the picture. So from that dead marriage, they started doing many things together. And today they are running a company together. So they're like high functional couple, very strong couple, and now into a happy marriage too.
So, you talked about shared goals, and I'm very curious to know. I think the Indian mentality is that a couple must have kids as a shared goal for a marriage to be successful. As an experienced counselor and therapist, what are your thoughts on that?
So, I would say it's an old philosophy. बच्चा कर लो सब ठीक हो जाएगा. अब भी बहुत सारे पेरेंट्स यही सजेशन देते हैं बेटा बच्चा कर लो क्या प्रॉब्लम है बंटी लग रहा है तुम्हारा रिलेशनशिप में बच्चा कर लो सब ठीक हो जाएगा. Shared goal may as one of the goal having kids together is good because you are bringing a new life together, right? And you nurture the kid. You as a unit, you come both of you guys into that one closed space to create family. So it definitely helps the marriage. But the child should come in the marriage only when the base of the relationship is strong. You cannot, construct a building when the base is not strong. So for this couple goal, specifically this couple goal, the base has to be very strong when you go ahead with a kid. Otherwise, the kid is going to really, really suffer a lot.
Not only that, I think even the marriage can suffer. I have seen people's marriages go, in fact, downwards after having a child and then maybe regaining, compatibility or momentum after. But because a child also brings a lot of challenges into a marriage. It's two and then it becomes three. And to make space, it's like imagine a two-seater, two people are sitting and now you have to convert that two-seater into a three-seater. So you're going to have to move and shift spaces and make space for a third person to come in. You'll have to adjust your expectations, your timing, your love quotient, love language, everything has to adjust. Where in a home, let's say it's two people, you hug, kiss, spend time. Now there's a third person. The child is crying, the child needs food, the child needs sleep, he's sick, she's sick, XYZ. So many factors come in. So I think the equation changes. It's not X plus Y, it's X plus Y plus Z equals to. True. And I think that changes everything. That changes the marriage completely. And this whole, what you said, bacha kar lo sab theek ho jayega, doesn't actually work at all. Like, I don't think it's a solution at all. I mean, as a counselor, having a child for a couple, yes, it's a great goal to have, but I don't think it's a solution.
It's never a solution. You've put it very rightly over here. It's a good goal to have. It brings two people together as a unit. It's just like running an organization. You buy a house together, you have kids together, their education, their marriage, all of these things. Only when the base is strong.
Yeah.
And there is something very cute I recently heard from one of my couple counseling case wherein, the husband said, Mansi, every time I see her as a mother, giving love to our child, I end up loving her much more. I see her as, another individual altogether. So in a way, it also adds on to the identity of the marriage.
Yeah.
You're just loving that individual. Today, you are loving that individual as a mother, as a father. That also adds up a lot of different love and energies in the marriage.
I agree, but you know, I think it takes a lot of effort first to make sure that you've streamlined the two people to add the third. I think my experience, not only in my own marriage, but in my friends and people that I know, or marriages that I see in the people around me, I feel like first the two pillars have to be strong for the third one to come in, or the fourth one to come in, or even the fifth one to come in. I feel like that whole setup has to be very strong. The
And you
two
know,
people.
when you're bringing the child in slightly damaged relationship, believe you me, it just goes the worse. It just falls apart.
Yeah.
The child is not able to fix because your expectations from each other also increases.
Yeah, I don't think a child can fix the marriage. I think it'll only get worse. Like, you will even go further and further apart because, like I said, imagine a two-seater becoming a three-seater. You will be sitting further apart. There's like now kids in between. So you have to find ways to, you
And
know.
with kids come a lot of other responsibilities, right?
Yeah.
It's not that easy.
Yeah.
Which both the partners need to understand. And
Correct.
because most of the people now, most of the couple, like all of us, are working. So you have to now plan it accordingly also.
Yeah, the balance is far more required than the earlier generations where it was a given that the wife was a homemaker and she would take care of the kids. Now, most women are working.
Absolutely.
You know,
And nobody
it
wants to
shared
sacrifice.
responsibilities,
Yes.
and it changes everything.
It changes. So base has to be very strong when you're bringing the child in the relationship.
Correct. Absolutely agree. So tell me, Indian marriages are often described as two families marrying into each other, right? It's like the oldest saying, लड़का लड़की की शादी नहीं होती, दो खानदान की शादी होती है. Psychologically, what does that actually do to the individual, to the person who's suddenly expected to, you know, love an entire family, love an entire khandan, and not just the partner, just the person they've chosen?
So definitely yes, Indian marriages, like we talk about, it's two khandan getting married. It's not just both the girl and the boy. But I think when we talk about marriages, it really impacts a lot when you are getting married to the entire family, because you end up loving each other more with respect to how you are responding and behaving with your families too. For example, how girls' behavior is with her mother-in-law. And Indian men, they would love their wife much more if their wife is able to maintain good relationship with his mother. So वो वाला mindset तो definitely it exists a lot in the Indian marriages. But is it overwhelming? It is. Because you can't expect suddenly the girl to, end up loving everybody. And the problem in Indian families are they don't include girl as a part of their family. Before that only they want her to respect and shower a lot of love towards them. You need to give it to her before you get it from her. That is not happening.
Also, don't you think it's like a very crazy conditional format where, like you said, she should have a good relationship with my parents in order for me to love her? What kind of a condition is that?
That is a childhood problem, trust me, because there are so many examples I have. Men, the guys, they have seen their mom to be certain way. And even now, they're not able to change. For example, let's say the guy has seen mother always cooking food, right? They are well educated. Still, they want their wife to be in the kitchen to cook food. Why? Because they have seen that. For them, their normal is mom in the kitchen or mom taking care of the kids first. That is, their mind is attuned that this is your primary responsibility. Why should I do it? It's not changing. If we talk about outside countries, they have seen equal responsibilities. And this will take a lot of time for Indian men to change. Only when our generation will start teaching it to them that, this is normal for the guy to be in the kitchen. This is such a common thing. I get to hear it from so many clients of mine. Mansi, इसकी मॉम आती हैं, हम दोनों साथ में घर में घुसते हैं. इसकी मॉम एक्सपेक्ट करती है कि मैं किचन में जाके पानी का ग्लास लाके इसको दूँ. Both of us, maybe she's earning more than the guy. Even then, these expectations are there. And guys are okay with it because they've seen it. I think psychologically what happens here is, for your subconscious mind, whatever you see becomes the normal in your mind. You have to unlearn the old patterns to learn the new ones, which will take time and a lot of effort from the guys.
Which you said they don't want to put in.
they have to choose to put in the efforts. That's what, no? Marriage is not about what I like, what she likes. It's important to understand that sometimes you go beyond the likings of your individual liking to choose your partner, to do certain things for your partner. And when we talk about, for example, this is a very common line that I get to hear from my clients. मानसी ये मेरे लिए stand नहीं लेता. सबसे पहले, what do you mean by stand? Right? We are not expecting, these girls are not expecting the guy to go ahead and fight with his family. Not at all. Stand simply means that listen to me, na Baba. Understand what I feel. How am I being treated in your family? Why 4 people are sitting and having conversations and I'm supposed to sit in my room? Why from day one, rather than appreciating me, you are just constantly giving feedbacks to me कि बेटा इसको तुम ऐसे नहीं ऐसे बना लेते तो बहुत अच्छा होता, हमारे यहाँ पे तो ऐसे ही बनता है, या ये तो बचपन से ना ऐसे ही बना हुआ खाता है. अरे, शी इज कुकिंग द सेम थिंग इन अ डिफरेंट वे. लेट हर डू, appreciate her. How will you feel her like a part of your family when you are not doing these things? It's a very basic thing. If we'll do that, they'll feel actually part of our family.
Yeah, I think also sometimes that you don't take a stand for me, like you said. I hear a lot of people say it as well. I think also it means like the boundaries are not really set by husbands in our society and culture. You know, there are no boundaries set for any set of parents. Sometimes girls don't set boundaries for their parents, and sometimes mostly boys don't set boundaries. There has to be boundaries. Like you are getting married and now you're a unit and they are outside that unit, but they don't want to be outside that unit. They want to be inside that unit. That boundary is so important for them to understand. And most parents don't understand it. And I'm not saying just the boys' parents, it is even sometimes the girls' parents.
Yeah, 100%.
That boundary has to be understood by both sets of families. That now 2 individuals have gotten together to start a life. Step back.
You know what they say? Beta, we are just trying to help you. You know, you are managing so many things. That's why I'm suggesting that I'll come and live with you for a few months to help you learn how to manage the house. It's okay. She'll learn. She'll make mistakes. Why do you want to come just for boundaries? They don't understand giving space so that the kids will learn to nurture their own family. They want to give their knowledge to them, and maybe it's not only knowledge, maybe it's just parents' insecurities.
Yeah, I think one of the most popular reels on Instagram is where the girls, they always show the girls saying, I don't need you to bring up my children. I'm living with one of yours and I can see the example that you've got. I don't want that. You know, it's like everyone is trying to tell you how to bring up your children, how to nurture your home, how to have a happy marriage. It's like, let everyone figure it out for themselves. It's like even siblings, for example. I can't guide my siblings how to have a happy married life. They are 2 different individuals to me and my partner.
They have to navigate it by themselves.
Exactly. They'll navigate by themselves. They'll have their own tools, their own format, their own traumas, their own, functionality. Nobody can tell you.
And just like 2 individuals are different, every relationship setup is different. You just can't tell it to them. Like you were talking about boundaries, a simple thing like, बेटा तुमने खाने में क्या खाया है यार? अच्छा उसने बस एक ही सब्जी बनाई है? बेटा मैंने तो तेरे को हमेशा 2 सब्जियां बनाई है. Now by saying these things, you know, indirectly you are putting wrong thoughts in your kid's mind. Then their mind will respond accordingly. That, you know, oh, mama was saying like this. Why do you want to do that?
Or even if they don't say mama was saying like this, they'll say you don't do enough for me. Because now it's in their head that you don't
You have
do enough for me.
planted the seed in a negative way.
Yeah.
Do not do this. Just simply talk, na baba. And what is the need of talking every single day, 3 times a day? Where are the boundaries?
That's what I'm saying. I think the boundaries is a very huge issue in our culture because they were not taught to actually have boundaries. Nobody's taught to have boundaries.
Nobody, and you were right. Be it girls' family, be it boys' family.
Yeah, nobody's taught.
Nobody is taught.
And there should be boundaries. And I think you should be able to navigate your marriage very independently without either families interfering.
Boundaries should be everywhere, be it siblings, be it friends, be it parents. It is your inner unit, which is your innermost circle. I always say once you get married, it's just the both of you. Rest everybody, they go out in the outermost, in the second circle of your life, not in the innermost circle. It's just the both of you there.
Yeah, and I think that itself, the sanctity of understanding that it's just two people actually solves half the problems. Because it's like otherwise everybody adds noise to your relationship. No one else gonna, like you said, everyone brings their own trauma and their own bias into it. No one's really gonna help you navigate. Only you two individuals can navigate what you're going through. Everybody else is going to add noise. It's like I always tell my husband, you bring other people, it's like drums, violin, piano, all this will come in. You and I won't be able to hear each other.
That is so true.
Yeah, that's how I describe it to him.
You just,
the minute
yeah.
everybody comes in, just imagine people walking in with different instruments. How will you and I be able to talk? There'll be so much noise. So let it be just silence where it's you and I, talking about things. Let the noise drown. And once we figure it out, then people can be there.
Like you said, वो बच्चे आ जाते हैं, so it's like A, B, the distance increases. Distance doesn't increase because of the kids. It increases because of these noises. There's so much of information floating into the relationship also that you're not able to listen to your partner.
Free wisdom that no one wants.
You're listening to everybody else, but not the person who's right there in front of you.
So let's talk about sacrifice. And it's a very big word in Indian marriages. Sacrifice is considered like one of the biggest virtues in Indian marriages, especially for women. So from where you sit as a psychologist, tell me, what does sacrifice mean to you? What according to you is it as a definition in a marriage? And where does it go from love to self-abandonment?
So, I think in Indian marriages, this is an old school thought wherein we talk about sacrifices. Now the definition is really changing, but it is changing still in a negative way. When your partner is telling you, hey, let's do this way, is it a control? Women, they end up taking it as a control where the partner is just suggesting to you. And it is not about sacrifice. Marriages have moved a lot away from the sacrifices. I think our moms, they had sacrificed a lot. They sacrificed their career, their aspiration, or their friends, their own families. That is called a self-abandonment, where the self never ever existed.
Correct.
That is called a sacrifice. But when we talk about today's marriages, I think self-abandonment is not happening to that extent what it used to be. But now, evolve is the right word, okay? For example, let's say if your partner wants you to dress up in certain way, and he's just suggesting that, hey, I would prefer you to carry yourself like this. You can put it in the category of control, or you can completely put it, oh, he loves me. That's why he's suggesting this to me. The only problem is there's a constant fear in the women's mind that I don't want to be controlled. Let's understand where is it coming from. Because they have seen their mothers sacrificed their own life to ensure that the family goes run well, they have this fear that I don't want to become that version of myself.
Yeah, they feel like my mother was controlled by the family and she sacrificed everything. I don't want to be that person. So you're constantly fighting that.
You're constantly fighting that. Maybe this is not your first-hand experience, but because you have that notion in your mind that maybe I'll be controlled the way my mother was controlled, so let me push away. This is something which is wrong. So these days, marriages are not about sacrifices. We can see women working. We can see women going out for solo travels. We can see them pampering themselves, yes. But at the same time, there are certain Indian marriages wherein these things are still not happening. Self-abandonment happens when you are parking yourself aside and only thinking about the family or your partner. Well, I will say it has to be the other way around. If you really want to run a happy family, a happy mother, a happy wife is needed. A happy daughter-in-law is needed. So self-abandonment ki jagah, you need to do everything that you want to do along with what your family wants to do.
I agree.
That's the right combination of these two things.
So Dr. Mansi, I think there are still some women, maybe in smaller cities or in backgrounds where working is not still considered normal for women, where it's mostly men and women are expected to still be homemakers. And I think that would be still a large part of our country. Tell me, when those girls have not really had their own careers, their own friendships, their own life outside the marriage, outside the Indian family setup, their own sense of self, and they come to you, what is the first thing you tell them to do for themselves?
to create their own identity, their own self, right? In this process of running the family, taking care of the marriage, they lose out. They don't know who they are. If you actually ask them, what are the 5 things that you like about yourself? No clue. Completely lost their own identity. What are the 5 things you want to do for yourself? When was the last time you pampered yourself? When was the last time, you prioritized yourself over your family? Nothing. And then they're actually thinking that they are one individual. They have no such thought process. And you look at their faces, there is no charm on their face also. Because their own self doesn't exist for them.
Yeah.
And because of this only, they are being disrespected. Not only by their husbands, by their families, by their kids too. Their kids also do not, because they do not know where and how to stop the other person. When you do not have any boundary for yourself, where you do not have any identity of yourself, there is no right, wrong, yes or no. Everything is accepted.
That's true. How does someone respect you then?
You don't respect yourself, how will you expect the other person to respect you? The way you are treated by others is exactly the way you treat yourself. If she's not prioritizing herself, nobody will ever do that for her. And that is a problem. And you are right, there are many such women, many.
Yeah, because I still like read so many articles where women write, about working is not still normal in their culture, in their cities, in their towns. It is still considered like, why would you need to work? You have a family that provides for you.
Thank you to Instagram. It has taken me to places in UP, Bihar, MP. I'm talking about towns in UP, Bihar, MP, and these and other such states. I was doing session for one of the lady. She said, she herself is a PhD, but she let go of her career years back just to raise the family. And today she is constantly begging her husband to just talk to her. Husband doesn't come back home on time. He has least bothered whatever is happening in the house. Zero attention. Because she's lost herself completely into it. She doesn't know who she is. And she was telling me that her kids also doesn't respect her anymore. They also talk to her the way the father is talking. She's being physically abused, verbally being abused. And my only suggestion to her was, what is she waiting for? She needs to go ahead, not only work, do something for herself. Then I had another session with her. Just imagine what is the simplest thing that she did for herself, and she was happy about it. She said, ma'am, I have taken out 15 minutes for myself and I went out for a walk.
Huh?
This is what is happening in these tier 2 cities.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that life is different.
But she is aware. She wants to do something. And that is why she's taking these sessions. So now she's able now, she's thinking to get back to work and on. And nobody in her house knows that she's taking these therapy sessions.
Yeah, because it is still considered very taboo and you don't talk about it, and most people think it's a mental issue if you have.
When I told her that this is not normal, her line was, ma'am, yahan to aise hi hota hai. She's much more educated than her husband.
My description of education is not degrees. I think a lot of people say I'm very educated, I'm more educated than him, or he will say I'm far more educated than her. I don't know. I mean, over the course of my life, my definition of education has changed. Earlier, I would measure education by degrees, colleges, where they've been, where they've studied, what they've achieved with that. I think now my sense of education comes from how big is their horizon.
Yeah.
And if they can't see different perspectives, different opinions, different ways of being, then you're not educated. Just because you have 2 degrees and you're narrow-minded, I will call you uneducated. Like, I don't know, I think
So you're right, open-mindedness.
Yeah.
Right? And knowledge is everywhere.
Yeah.
Degrees doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think there was a time when, maybe in the 80s or 90s, a person was educated and then they were non-educated. Like, not every Indian was a degree holder. Not everybody went to university to study. It was very common for people to sit on a shop and start working.
True.
Or to join the family business, even though just a school dropout. But I think today everybody has degrees, so I don't count educated people as educated is how open-minded you are, how big your horizon is, how big your acceptance is of different people from different walks of life. For me, that is now how educated you are.
But unfortunately, in Indian marriages, when we talk about, even if women is more educated, it doesn't matter. What matters is the boy, even now, in most of the families.
I think it'll take a long time to change
It will
that.
take a long time. Definitely, yes.
So let's move on to the last segment. I want to talk about, since we're talking about Indian marriages and Indian setup, which is different to the rest of the world, let's talk about the family systems in India within marriages. Tell me, in-law conflict is one of the most common reasons couples come for therapy, right? And in your experience, is the in-law problem actually the biggest problem, or do you think it's a symptom of something that the couple hasn't sorted out amongst themselves and they make that the problem?
So, definitely in India, in-laws are a problem, but there are certain marriages where the preconceived notions that in-laws are a problem, they become the problem eventually. You're not starting with it. But I would say in-laws in Indian marriages are a set of problem because of lack of boundaries. If they create boundaries, there are no issues. Then there are certain marriages where the marriage itself, the relationship between both the partner is so weak that their weakness of the relationship is reflected on the in-laws relationship. The guy is not able to handle the relationship and we are just thinking that, oh, it's because of the in-laws it's not working. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's the relationship which is weak. And that is just one contributing reason, not the 100% reason. And then there's another pattern I'll share. Most of the times when we think that, oh, it's because of the in-laws. Let's say you are in a joint family setup. You're living with the in-laws and you're constantly fighting. So you end up thinking that it's because of the in-laws that you're not able to build your relationship and you decide to live separately. But even after living separately, you see that there are issues. There are compatibility issues. The values are absolutely different. So it's ideally not in-laws. It's the couple that is not able to sustain through. So this is I think if you are living with in-laws and you feel that your relationship is weak, it's always good to live separately to figure it out whether it's your relationship or it's your in-laws. You'll get the right answer.
But why do you think that in-laws has become such a toxic word and automatically it's considered like a very toxic situation the minute you say you live with your in-laws? Why do you think that is?
The main reason behind it is, number one, the preconceived notions. Like girls are carrying this notion that in-laws are going to create some issues. Maybe they are not, but it's a preconceived notions. Number two is sometimes in-laws, they forget their boundaries, right? कितने बजे आ रहे हो, कितने बजे जाओगे? Let kids live. It's okay. Third is, we do not accept the way the kids are, right? We still want to make them function the way we want it. That is a bigger problem. So these are the three reasons because of which in-laws are becoming an issue. I think there's one more reason, which is there is no acceptance with respect to the way the girl is. Accept her the way she is. Like if she wants to, if she wants to wake up at 9 a.m. in the morning, it's okay. That's her choice.
And it's her life.
नहीं बेटा, हम तो हमारे ज़माने में सुबह 7 बजे नहा धो के किचन में चले जाते थे. How does that matter? She is working, not working, that's okay. If your son is waking up at 10, how can you expect your daughter-in-law to wake up at 7 a.m. in the morning? So there are these things which they are not able to accept. If she doesn't want to cook, it's okay. That's her choice. But Indian parents are not able to accept this shift. They want the girl to behave the way they want, which is not acceptable to this generation at all.
I think it all boils down to control. And I think what my understanding of not just Indian marriages, but human beings at large is we all like to be in control. So we like to be in control at work, we like to be in control at home, we like to be in control of our marriages, of our relationships, of our friendships. I told her to call me at 5, she didn't call me back. I told my boss that leave the file for me, he didn't leave it. I told my son to, pick up his bag in the morning, he still left it there. I just feel like that sense of control is so high. And I don't think we are, like we discussed, taught boundaries. Number one, I don't think we're taught to like let go. So you gave, these are silly things, right? She wakes up at a particular time. She wants to cook, not wants to. She dresses in a particular type. She's short-tempered, or she likes to go out a lot. Everything is a conversation. Why? Because you're not able to control. And I think the actual issue is the fact that you're not able to control her. Because you're able to control your son and you're not able to control her, you're unhappy. The minute you're able to control her, you'll be okay with it. If she says, yes, I'll do what you say, beta, can you come back by 6? Okay, mummy ji, I'll be back at 6. You're happy. It's not that she came at 6 or she came at 7 that actually made a difference to your life. The fact that you were able to control her. So I don't know, according to me, it boils down to control. And even parents, it's not just in-laws. Even parents try to control you. In the West, it is an understood thing. After 18, they're like, bye. You're an adult, look after yourself.
100%,
right?
yes.
But in India, it's not like that. You will see a mother mothering a 38-year-old girl or a 42-year-old man. And you think to yourself, that's an adult. Why are you mothering them like they're children? They're not. That whole sense of control doesn't go away even with age. So I think that's where like the real issue is. I don't think it's about daughter-in-law, son-in-law, daughter, son. I think all of that is just titles. I think in the end, it's like they don't know when to step back and be like, I don't need to control this.
See, we need to understand where is control coming from, because they think whatever their ways are absolutely right, which is not true. They want to control their kids or their daughter-in-law, whosoever, like you said, because as per them, their experiences, their belief is right. And they want to just further pass it on. There is a very simple one-liner thing in relationship, be it relationship with your in-laws, your partner, let them be. If you really want any relationship to work, stop trying to change the other person. And of course, the control will automatically go when they allow them to be.
Yeah, I think the minute you let go, like I said, it's all about control.
Yeah.
If you don't try to control anyone, I think that relationship blossoms. The minute you're trying to control the relationship, vice versa. What if you're trying to control your parents and make them be how you want them to be as
That's what I'm
parents?
saying, let
when
them be.
when people are like, for example, when you're teenagers, you're like, her mom comes, calls her every day and she buys her this makeup, and you don't allow me to go and buy makeup. Like, for example, I was not allowed to buy any makeup, and I wasn't allowed to be like, I was very tomboyish. My parents just preferred it and they didn't want to like get into makeup, skirts, dress up, this, that. They were like, no. And I used to be like, all the other parents allow it, you don't. So I was trying to control my parents to make them do what the other parents were allowing. What happens is, it creates tension.
Of course.
Yeah, so I feel like if you actually analyze, it's all about control. The minute you let go, like, okay, this is how my parents are. They're old-fashioned. They don't want me to dress up and, I don't know, they think it's provocative. Even like wearing a skirt, back in the day, they thought it was provocative. Fine, that's how they are. That's their thought process. You can't change it. So I think acceptance is so low.
Acceptance and let them be.
Yeah.
Simple philosophy. If you apply it to any relationship of yours in your life, it's much more safe space for you in your own mind only.
So, you spoke about patterns, right, that we carry, and you said all the trauma and baggage that we carry from childhood. You believe in all the wars that are first fought in the mind, right? So, when two people come together in a marriage, they're also bringing two childhoods, two sets of wounds, two definitions of what love looks like, because their parents and their siblings and their families have taught them what love actually means according to them. At what point does a couple stop fighting each other and they're fighting their conditioning?
At what point in the relationship? I
Yeah.
think from the beginning itself, they are fighting with their conditioning. Because conditioning is such which creates your entire belief system in the marriage. And then you accordingly behave. For example, like childhood conditioning is so much important when we talk about your relationship, your romantic relationship, fear of abandonment, any kind of an avoidant behavior. Let's say if you're coming from traumatic childhood, right? There are two kinds of behavior most of the times when an individual chooses to adapt. For example, avoidant or anxious. If you are avoidant, you are behaving that pattern in your marriage also, then you are not there for your partner. You're always trying to run away from the relationship. Difficult conversations, completely non-confrontational, very surface level, no depth at all. And if you are battling with fear of abandonment because you have seen these things in your child, then you will come and you will kind of see the same patterns over here. You're constantly calling your partner to feel safe. You constantly want to be with your partner. You want your partner to be 100% present along with you. If there is little gap here and there, anxiety to the level that we can't even imagine. So these are the two most common patterns that we bring from our childhood, that is monitoring the relationship also. And if you are avoidant and anxious, it is so difficult to make this relationship work. The other toxic patterns is when you see your one of the parent has been abusive, not towards you, but maybe towards your mother. You have learned anger, right? Not that they were teaching you to be angry, but you saw it and your mind took it as completely normal. Now, when you are in the relationship, your tonality is always rude. You are abusive automatically because this is your learned behavior. And if your partner even mentions it, you're like, no, this is normal. This is your normal because you have experienced it. Your partner has not experienced it. So there are many such patterns, avoidant, anxious, anger issues. These are all patterns that you bring, and there is no point. You bring in, you start the relationship with that only. But definitely, till the time that honeymoon period is on, the dopamine rush is on, which is the first 3 months of the relationship, maybe it will not come to the surface. But once you know that you are exclusive with each other, everything will start coming to the surface.
Also, I think like a lot of people, live in that illusion of, I don't have any baggage. I had a very happy childhood. I had the perfect family. I still have a perfect family. And I think like I see most people live under that illusion. I don't have any conditioning. I don't have any traumas that I'm carrying. And I'm sitting there thinking, everyone does. It's just acknowledging it. And the best of parents, the best of families, the best of environments must have still given you some trauma, must have still given you conditioning. But like people don't want to see it.
They don't want to see it, they don't want to accept it. And it's not like you clearly said, it's not important to have traumatic childhood to get into those triggers.
Yeah.
It can be your smallest possible experience, like school bully. Or maybe, I do get people, I recently had somebody who said that, I never achieve anything good in my life. So I'm bound to achieve bad relationship too. Where is this coming from? Just because she aimed for something very high and she could not achieve that. This is not trauma, this is our experience. But is it a belief? 100%. And all of these beliefs, they give you the narrative of your future. And then you accept it as a reality. So it's very important for all of us. Let's not talk about traumas, triggers, but the belief. Work on your belief. And this is where cognitive behavioral therapy comes into the picture, to unquote your old belief system and quote the new ones.
And I think most people believe their belief system is the only right way to live. Number one. Number two, they think that it is like set in stone. It can't be changed. But nothing is set in stone. It's all sand. Water takes it away, it washed away. We all are like that sand. And everything can be rewritten. Everything can be unlearned and learned again. But everyone kind of believes like their belief system is the only way.
This is where, when we talk about that relationships are more about liking each other, not loving each other. Liking will happen only when you're evolving. And this evolving is not only the way you look, evolving is the way you think. And the way you think will change only when you are evolving in your belief system too. There is nothing right or wrong. You have to learn to live in the gray and accept the person the way the other person is. That can happen only when you park your belief system aside.
I agree. So tell me, if the younger version of you, before the PhD, before the thousands of couples, before all of it, could sit across from you today, what would she want to ask about love?
Is love important, or liking the person is more important?
Yeah, I think the lines can be blurred, but I think it's a very distinct difference between the two. And you've explained it very beautifully throughout the episode, throughout this conversation, the distinction between liking and loving. And I hope that people were able to understand what I understood from it today. And tell me, after everything you've witnessed inside marriages, the betrayals, the sacrifices, and the silences, do you actually believe marriage as an institution is still built for human beings, or have we all just like submitted to it?
Marriage is definitely built for human beings, but all of us, we need to be flexible. Like I was telling you, it's for all of us. I'll answer this question again. Marriage is a beautiful institution to be in, because I think if you get a partner wherein you are able to complement each other, it's a beautiful unit to be with. But at the same time, we need to remember a few things, which is evolve together rather than understanding that, let me try to control this person to have happy marriage. It's not about control. Marriage is not about dictating your likes. It's about exploring likes, each other's likes together. Marriage is more and more about positive experiences together rather than just constantly talking about what triggered me, what my traumas are. Let's bring more of love, fun, keenness, openness, all of these things. And 3A, as in alphabet A, which are very important in marriages: affection, acknowledge, and appreciate. If we are doing all of these things, marriage is a beautiful institution to be in.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mansi. It was such a pleasure speaking to you today and getting a perspective on marriage, relationships, and traumas. Thank you.